Hey everybody, welcome to Truth Unbound, and I'm your host, Walter Swaim. Now, back in the early 2000s, you heard things like this.
How you can justify wanting to take something away that gives meaning to 95% of the American people and replace it with something that gives meaning to just 5% of the American people?
Well, what an incredibly stupid question. First, I've said repeatedly that this stuff cannot be taken away from people. It is their favorite toy, and it will remain so, as Freud said, as long as we're afraid of death. Second, I hope I've made it clear that I'm perfectly happy for people to have these toys and to play with them at home and hug them to themselves and so on and share them with other people who come around and play with the toys. So that's absolutely fine. They are not to make me play with these toys. I will not play with the toys. Don't bring the toys to my house. Don't say my children must play with these toys. Enough with clerical and religious bullying and intimidation. Is that finally clear? Have I got that across? Thank you.
And this.
This is probably going to be the most simplest one for you to answer, but what if you're wrong?
Well, what if I'm wrong? Anybody could be wrong. We could all be wrong about the flying spaghetti monster and the pink unicorn and the flying teapot. You happen to have been brought up in the Christian faith. You know what it's like not to believe in a particular faith because you're not a Muslim, you're not a Hindu. Why aren't you a Hindu? Because you happen to have been brought up in America, not in India. If you'd been brought up in India, you'd be a Hindu. If you were brought up in Denmark in the time of the Vikings, you'd be believing in Wotan and Thor. If you were brought up in classical Greece, you'd be believing in Zeus. If you were brought up in Central Africa, you'd be believing in the great Juju up the mountain. There's no particular reason to pick on the Judeo-Christian God in which, by the sheerest accident, you happen to have been brought up and ask me the question, what if I'm wrong? What if you're wrong about the great Juju at the bottom of the sea?
Now, popular new atheists like Christopher Hitchens, Richard Dawkins, and Sam Harris gained a huge and growing following this way. They filled auditoriums, they sold books, sold videos, and it was a huge movement at the time. But suddenly, we're looking around some years later now in 2025, and like many movements like this, new atheism, it's died, or at least it's on life support. So what was it really? Why has it been dying? And what's next for the follower of Jesus in this post-New Atheism world? Well, let's find out, and let's do that right now. Hey, I want to thank you for joining in the podcast here at Truth Unbound, where we seek God's truth about all the questions that we have about life and society and God and the Bible. And if you would like to see more people hear God's truth and the gospel in responding to questions about what's going on around us and about God and Christianity, then would you click on like, follow, and send others the link to this podcast today. Thank you so very much. And also, if you've been wondering if you'll ever be able to afford a biblically based, missional, doctrinally sound, and accredited degree, from certificate all the way to doctorate, whether it's in leadership, counseling, missions, Bible and theology, or education, then Louisiana Baptist University, or LBU, is for you. So enroll today and mention Truth Unbound, and you'll receive a $500 scholarship when you enroll. So apply today at lbu.edu now. All right, so let's get back to what is or what was New Atheism and why it's not so new anymore. So the New Atheisms, as we stated before, started around the year 2000 or so, and it went into a climax around 2010 to 15, though we started to see its popularity and impact begin to slide. Its leaders were Christopher Hitchens, Sam Harris, Richard Dawkins, and others. And they all came from different areas of study or expertise. Hitchens was a journalist, Dawkins a biologist, Harris a philosopher. And their main message included these things. First of all, their hardcore belief that there is absolutely no God, totally sure of it. and that it's ridiculous to even think there could be. They also are firm believers in scientism. Scientism's the belief that science alone can and only give us the answers that we need. And part of this is their belief that science has long disproved God's existence. Now, they also say that religion, mostly they mean Christianity, is not just false, but dangerous to mankind because it's caused every kind of problem in society throughout human history, and it's pampered and privileged and should just be shut away and forgotten forever. And then things were going to get, well, way better. But what distinguished them from older traditional atheism or classical atheism is that they had this more angry, aggressive, and evangelistic type advance and attitude and tone against the religious, again, especially Christians. They also were distinguished from old atheism in that atheism mostly was debated and discussed among academia and groups of atheists and discussed through books and such. Also, the new atheists were more vocal. Open grassroots public debates were engaged in and on video, and even more, they were more involved in political actions, especially against Christians and the religious. But what in the world has happened to them? They were so huge and so strong and so populous. Well, their most vocal leaders, first of all, have simply moved on, literally and figuratively. Dawkins has been, in recent years, openly critical of the transgender movement and even said he enjoyed the benefits recently of a Christianized culture. We did a podcast on that, in fact. And so this alienated a lot of his followers, and they turned on him. Sam Harris has kind of just moved on to more cultural issues, and, well, he shifted his focus away from atheist debates more toward topics like neuroscience and mindfulness and political commentary, etc. And his critics have accused him of really fostering or aligning with some right-leaning narratives, whether he really meant to or not, and so they're coming down hard on him. Now, in the case of Christopher Hitchens, he passed away in 2011 after a courageous fight against esophageal cancer. But besides so many of the movement's leaders changing direction in their emphasis and aging and even passing on, what really caused its demise? First, the new atheist gave absolutely no room to even the consideration of the supernatural, specifically the God of the Bible, of course. So the actual close-minded people in this case was themselves, and their intolerance has not outlasted a culture that is at least seeking and open to the possibility of things, or there's an increase in that, and in things that we cannot see, and that have answers in a natural world context for us that the natural world can't produce. This also means that science can't disprove God. It can neither prove nor disprove him, to be honest. Just like it can't prove or disprove or explain to us really what love is or peace, forgiveness. And it is simply outside of its capabilities, outside the capabilities of science, that is, where it relies on the observable and can test it again and again. If the answers are not here inside the world, then the consideration of something outside of the world could at least give us the possibility of some of the answers we seek. In Psalm 19:1, it says, "The heavens declare the glory of God." Colossians 1:16, "For by him were all things created, visible and invisible." Science can't test that. Secondly, to say that Christianity has caused the world's ills is really disingenuous. Of course, there have been Christians, by great numbers, supposedly Christian, who have committed horrible acts and said some despicable things. But Christianity, the Christianity of the Bible itself, has produced the greatest moral revolutions in history. For instance, the abolition of slavery. Hospitals have been founded because of it. Literacy has grown, and charity. And ironically, the scientific method the new atheist depends on so much, and entirely so, was discovered and shaped by, you guessed it, Christians. or at least by those who believed in God. Thirdly, biblical faith is not blind or ridiculous, as they said, and they said it wasn't a part of an educated society. But it is trust based on evidence and revelation. Hebrews 11:1 says, "Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen." Also, Jesus proved his identity through miracles and fulfilled prophecy, and the historical resurrection is historically verifiable. It is testable. 1 John 1:1, John said this, "That which was from the beginning, which we have heard, which we have seen with our eyes, which we have looked upon, and our hands have handled of the word of life." Lastly, the new atheist would say that morality doesn't need God. We can figure that out on our own, and frankly, we have. But without God, morality becomes subjective. One culture's ideas of what's right and wrong can go against another culture. It's just a matter of opinion. We can't know evil apart from knowing what good is in the first place, or what is moral. And morality, therefore, requires a moral lawgiver. And we find that in God. In 1 Peter 1:16, he said, "Be holy, for I am holy." Also, new atheism promised this hope in this new world when religion and faith are just forgotten completely and put away and locked away, and everything would improve, and everything would be better, and everything would be more enlightened. But now we're finding out 10, 15, 20 years later, they didn't deliver on their promise. And so many are seeking once again, seeking for truth. And God is and shows us and gives us that truth. So new atheism simply crumbled under the weight of its own arguments. And the truth of God and his word remains standing once again, as it always has and always will. But believer in Jesus, we were told this would come. In 2 Peter 3:3, Peter said, "Knowing this first, that there shall come in the last days scoffers, walking after their own lusts." Paul told Timothy in 2 Timothy 3:7, "Ever learning and never able to come to the knowledge of the truth." And then again, Paul said, "For the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty in God for pulling down strongholds, casting down arguments, and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God, bringing every thought into captivity to the obedience of Christ." And that's in 2 Corinthians 10, verses 4 through 5. So, believer, new atheism has come and gone like a lot of movements like it. But you stand strong in the truth of God, because the truth of God stands still. And you have to know, though, what his truth is by learning it from his word. Pray for wisdom and respond in grace in how you answer those who deny Jesus and bring questions, even accusations. Peter said this, "But in your hearts honor Christ the Lord as holy, always being prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you, yet do it with gentleness and respect." 1 Peter 3:15 in the ESV. Well, my friend, I know this has been brief, but I hope this has cleared this up and given you some knowledge about the new atheist movement and what it was, and it still has its vestiges today. But nevertheless, be careful and be strong, and now you know. And don't forget to click on like and to follow the podcast and share it with others on your social media, text, messenger, everything you can. And thank you so much for being here, and follow Jesus, because when you do, you will always follow the truth.